Lillian and Kevin got married spontaneously. He came to such a strange city for work and met her on the street on the day of his departure. Her eyes attracted him so much that he approached her and offered to marry her, forgetting all embarrassments. She too overcame all her principles and immediately agreed. After some time, they got married. The newlyweds received marriage registration documents and went to Kevin's hometown. Lillian's parents were shocked by the news, but quickly came to terms with it. Lillian was 27 years old, and her parents were begging to worry that she would not marry. And suddenly, such a miracle happened. They didn't know whether to rejoice in them or vice versa. Kevin's relatives were also not happy with the new relative. Lillian was not beautiful. She was 3 years older than her husband, and she didn't dress very well. But he blew dust particles off her and looked like a boy in love to the point of madness. After 2 years of marriage, Lillian gave birth to a girl, and a year later, they had a son. Kevin was so happy, and he helped his wife in everything. Gradually, Kevin's family got used to Lillian and began to perceive her as their own due to her inner world. She was kind to everyone, and she loved her children and her husband very much. She managed to do household chores and cooked perfectly. She knitted, sewed, and was gardening. But not everything in life was so smooth. One day, Kevin didn't come home after work. They searched for him everywhere, called all the hospitals, the police, and morgues. There was no information about her husband. Lillian called all of Kevin's colleagues, but she only managed to find out that he left work on time. Nothing special was seen. Everything was usual. In the end, Lillian wrote a statement to the police about the disappearance of her husband. Days and months passed. Lillian didn't know where to look for her husband, what to do, and what to think about in such a situation. No one could guess where an adequate adult person had disappeared in the middle of the day. Lillian had to look for a job. Her husband insisted that she stay at home and take care of the children and the household. He made good money to provide for his family, and now she had nothing to live on. Kevin's parents helped her as much as they could whilst his father worked. And when Kevin's father fell ill, Lillian had to take care of them. She alone provided for 2 families. She took on all kinds of jobs. 2 years later, she lost a lot of weight from overwork and worries. She had gray hair and wrinkles. Everyone around began to hint to Lillian that she needed to think about herself. "Lillian, maybe you should get married. You will have support, and your children need a father." Lillian couldn't understand how she could be offered such a thing, because they didn't know anything about Kevin. He was not even recognized as missing, and Lillian believed he was alive. She sobbed at night when everyone was asleep, and in the morning she tried to get rid of bags under her eyes and bruises from lack of sleep, but nothing helped her. She became like an old woman. 5 years later, Lillian lost her main job and was looking for a new job when she saw an advertisement that a cook was needed in a rich house. Payment was guaranteed very high. She could leave all her part-time jobs and work in one place. Lillian was an amazing cook, and she also had diplomas from the cooking courses. She went for an interview. The mistress of the house examined her from head to toe and promised to think about it. And that evening she called and said that Lillian had been hired. She was happy that now she would have more money and free time for children. The night before going to work was exciting. Lillian hardly managed to sleep. When she came to work in a rich house, her husband Kevin opened the door. She nearly passed out, but he acted as if he had seen Lillian for the first time. And for a moment, she thought she might have been imagining things. But she didn't want to get into trouble with her new employees, so she pretended she didn't know him either. Lillian did her best to contain her emotions, and when she returned home, she burst into tears. She decided to find out how Kevin ended up there and why he didn't recognize his wife. She thought that she had changed a lot in 5 years and decided to clean herself up. She began to take care of herself. She got new hair and makeup, but Kevin still acted cold and dry. One day, the lady of the house was away on business for a week, and Lillian brought old photos of her children with her and placed them in the kitchen. Kevin came to ask for water, and his eyes involuntarily lingered on this photo. He held out his hand to the photo, but then came to his senses, apologized, and quickly left. In the evening, he asked Lillian to stay because he was not feeling very well, and he might need her help. They talked for a long time, and Lillian was finally convinced that it was her husband with memory loss. The weather began to deteriorate. Kevin started having headaches. Lillian called a doctor from the private clinic where he was seen, and Kevin was rushed to the hospital. Lillian was there. She learned from the nurses that he first came here 5 years ago with a severe head injury. A rich woman brought him, introducing herself as his wife. Lillian never left his bed for a minute, and when Kevin returned to his normal state, she began to talk to him. She recalled significant moments for them. She showed him photos of the places they liked to be together, their joint photos. Kevin took one photo in his hands and looked at it for a long time, and then he grabbed his head and lost consciousness. The doctors asked Lillian to leave the ward, after which they spent a long time around her husband. Then they said that he would not recover soon, but Lillian was waiting. She sat in the corridor for several days until she heard him call her name. Kevin came to his senses. In the end, it turned out that his boss laid eyes on him, and she even made him various hints that they needed to be together, but he ignored her advances. And when she found out that Kevin was married to an unknown person, she began to show her activity even more persistently. But when Kevin told her that he would be forced to quit, his boss hired people to scare him. They met him in the evening after work and smashed his head. He lost his memory, and the woman took advantage of the situation, deceived him, and brought him to her home, calling herself his wife. Kevin understood that she could continue her intrigues, and he didn't hold her accountable for the sake of the peace of his wife and children, and they themselves went away from the city where they lived together and happily to this day.